Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this webinar on behalf of VLA Virtual Legal Advisory. Today, I have a very esteemed guest speaker with me, Mr. Oves Anwer. Oves, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
We will be speaking about something that uh, obviously has shattered the entire country in the last week or 10 days. We'll be speaking about the India Pakistan conflict, violations of international humanitarian law by India, and of course, other aspects as well of terrorism and related concepts. But firstly, I would like to introduce Aves properly because Aves, as I was just saying to you before we commence this webinar, you have a beautiful profile, and we already know that you're an amazing speaker. So Aves is a distinguished expert in international law with a particular focus on counterterrorism and related frameworks. He currently serves as the director of the Research Society for International Law. He holds a master's in international nuclear law from the University of Montpellier, an LLM in international legal studies from the University of Vienna, as well as an LLM from SOAS. His professional experience includes consultancy work with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, as well as previous service at Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Wow. Thank you again, Oves, for joining us. It's an honor for us.
Thank you so much.
So, Oves, I would actually like to kick off this webinar with a rather poignant note. And I mean, it was a very painful time for us, and it still is, because it's something that, uh, when we talk about war, we've read about it, we have seen it in movies, but this is the first time that I've actually experienced something like this firsthand. And it is, of course, extremely painful for those who lost loved ones during this tragedy. And my heart goes out to the
Absolutely.
families of all of those who perished, especially the little children. I mean, we've been seeing the images, across TV channels and social media, and it's just heartbreaking. It was very heartbreaking as well to see the mosques destroyed, Qurans ripped to shreds, and everything else that transpired as well. And it was a very haunting experience of this because I've got friends living, well, of course, you're based in the Punjab as well, and I've got friends living in Bhagalpur. And during Operation Sindoor and afterwards as well, when the attack took place at the Rawalpindi air bases, they have been absolutely terrified. And even after that, in fact, the conflict has continued across the line of control. So I can well imagine how horrific it must be. Even when we hear some sort of a mini explosion in Karachi, even now it could just be a tire explosion or something like that. We just feel something
Yeah,
has happened because it did reach to the Malir district in Karachi as well. And when those drones were intercepted, people across the city heard the horrible sounds. So it has been very painful, to say the least. And of course, Punjab had also issued SOPs for people as to what sort of items they should stock up. And I'll tell you that I went out for 3 days to buy groceries, and flashlights and other sorts of things because I was genuinely afraid. And then, of course, the ceasefire was announced, which I don't necessarily trust, Awais, but you're the expert. Of course, you will talk more about that and this mysterious, the mysterious ceasefire, the reasons behind it, and what should we anticipate now. So, Awais, without further ado, I'd like to start from the very beginning, right? And I'd like to go back to April 22nd to Pahalgam. And the first question that I'd like to ask you is that, um, so I need to say this to the viewers that I'm extremely sorry about Pahalgam, and as a humanist, more than anything else, I grieve the loss of life of anybody, and I believe in the equality of everybody, irrespective of caste, creed, gender, religion, etc. But India blaming Pakistan without any concrete evidence, without carrying out an investigation is just something that I have not been in favor of, and many haven't. So, Awais, what is your take on that if we go back to Pahalgam?
Sana, thank you so much, first of all, for having me, but also beginning this with expressing sorrow on the loss of life. Um, uh, and not just civilian life, but also military personnel that were killed on both sides, and also for condemning terrorist acts. Right, I think that's the position that we should start with. That terrorism in any form or the targeting of civilians in any form is simply unjustified. Right, um, and we know that even in war, direct targeting of civilians is a violation of the laws of war. It's a violation of the Geneva Conventions. It is what is considered, if it's grave enough to be war crimes. And so, in that vein, understanding really the response that should take place. Now, we have to understand that terrorism is essentially a crime, right? It is a very serious crime. It is the one of the most serious forms of violence that takes place in a society, but it is a crime. And the normal response of a state to a crime is the investigation, uh, finding all the facts, finding all the individuals involved, apprehending them, taking them up for trial. If there are, transnational issues, then conducting mutual legal assistance, maybe extradition from another country, then prosecuting them, holding them to having a fair trial, affording them the rights that they need, but also ensuring that you get safe convictions, which shows that the state has been fair in its approach and has not violated the rule of law or the protections that are afforded. What we see here with the Pahalgam attack is before even an investigation could start, really, right? Within 10 minutes, you had an FIR registered an hour and a half away um, in Indian occupied Kashmir, where it was stated and it was mentioned that Pakistan is involved or there are cross-border elements in this. Now, first of all, it is simply impossible, as anyone would know, to conduct an investigation that fast. Right now, none of the four individuals who were allegedly involved in these attacks were apprehended. Right, they haven't been apprehended, and we don't really know who is behind this. Right, so there is simply um, a statement. Now, the best case scenario is that this allegation on Pakistan has been made, best case from India's perspective, has been made based on concrete intelligence that they found. Well, then bring that to the fore, or at least notify or share that with Pakistan, right? What happens normally is that when you have an investigation, um, and you feel that another country is involved, or there is some level of allegation there, you build up your evidence, and then you create what is known as a mutual legal assistance request, where if there are citizens of another country involved in this, they're in that country, or there was another country, wahan pe non-state actors went ahead and they gave support to, say, a terrorist attack in India. The rational thing is that as part of your investigation, you will conduct mutual legal assistance. Now, what that means is mutual legal assistance can be arresting people in Pakistan, holding them, interrogating them, or even conducting, wiretaps here, conducting investigations on behalf of the Indian authorities here. It could also mean that we start a case here if enough evidence is given and shared with us. Um, what we see here is nothing of the sort happened, right? Worst case scenario that there were individuals who did this attack and then came to Pakistan or sought sanctuary in Pakistan. There's another legal process for that, and that is known as extradition. Right? Pakistan and India both have extradition mechanisms. Even if we don't have an extradition treaty, you can have ad hoc extradition mechanisms, just as you can have ad hoc mutual legal assistance mechanisms, even absent a bilateral mutual legal assistance treaty or a bilateral extradition treaty. So all of this could have been done. And it's not like we haven't done this in the past, right? We've done this with regards to Mumbai. We ran, almost a decade-long case against Zakir Rahman Lakhvi and for people who were involved allegedly in those cases. Um, and to think that Pakistan would not have cooperated is I think false, because the obligation to cooperate in such matters is there under international law. And the primary vehicle for this is UN Security Council Resolution 1373, right? So 1373, this is the especially after 9/11, this became the primary platform by which states were obligated to ensure that no safe haven was given to terrorists, that terrorists were brought to justice, that the financiers and the people who supported terrorists, right, they were all brought to justice, and that no form of sanctuary, safe haven, any sort of support was given to these terrorists. So Pakistan was already under an obligation. There was no need for that. Secondly, if you look at the history, the recent history, Pakistan's been under a lot of pressure to deal with matters of terrorism or at an international level as well as domestically. So if you remember Pakistan's grey listing, where we got off the grey list in 2022, for about 3, 4 years, we were on this grey list. It was a huge mammoth exercise that the state of Pakistan undertook to revise its legal procedures, its effectiveness in dealing with counterterrorism financing, terrorism financing and how to counter that. Also, we looked at money laundering, but we looked at a range of counterterrorism measures in Pakistan and really upgraded our skills and our capacities in that regard. So Pakistan is in an ideal position to be supporting any sort of investigation that ought to have taken place. This unfortunately did not take place, and what we saw, as you saw, was the exchange of missiles, attacks, civilians being targeted, and whatnot.
Thanks, Oves. You've really beautifully explained that. And actually, this is a question that I was going to ask later on, but I'm going to push it now. There was a conference at Pakistan Institute of International Affairs, which is where we first met last year, in fact.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and this was just a few days after Pahalgam, and Sherry Rahman was there, and she was the keynote speaker. So she said that because she gave a very fiery speech in across Pakistan, we everybody heard that, and she said that we have been trying to make contact, with India, but nobody answers the hotlines. They're all practically dead. So that is basically what you've been explaining, that the proper course of action was an investigation. There are rules and regulations in place, as you rightly said, but it seems that India deliberately didn't want to go down that route. Now, this brings me to this question of, the sort of Gulf of Tonkin, Reichstag fire, weapons of mass destruction, false flag operations, that you carry out yourself, and you blame the other party because you want to provoke that party, you want to attack them. So, and of course, we go back. We all know that Modi has an agenda. We know that uh, he is anti-Islam, for all intents and purposes. We are aware of that. So, what is your take on the fascist ideology that his party has been promoting, and the possibility of this being a false flag operation?
Sana, this is really, I mean, it gets to the root of the issue, right? Understanding why a state would resort to the worst form of violence, right? It doesn't get worse than a war, essentially, or armed conflict against another. So the most extreme form of violence, why would a state, you know, use that as an option in response to essentially a crime, right? That's taking place now. And this is assuming that Pakistan at all has ever been involved in this, right? The reason is exactly this, that it isn't about getting justice. It isn't about stopping terrorism on your soil or stopping another country from utilizing terrorism as a tool of statecraft or things like that. That's not even there. Assuming that Pakistan is involved in this, right? And first of all, Pakistan, I think, has certainly not been involved in this particular thing. The reason is that you pinpointed it. Modi has a certain particular ideology, and that is to demonstrate and manifest the superiority of Hindutva ideology, of Hindus over Muslims, especially in the subcontinent, right? This we know, back from the RSS, looking at its history as a supremacist organization inspired by the Nazis. We understand that this has been part of legal laws that have been passed, whether it's a citizenship law, whether it is a range of other laws that have been pushed in, policies that have been pushed in and then promoted in India. And so this simply being the fact that Pakistan is a Muslim country and it is the ideal whipping boy to raise not only the war hysteria, but the hysteria within their state that look at Muslims are all terrorists and we need to teach them a lesson, and we are now this bold entity. The other thing that I want to remind our viewers is that we cannot divorce this supremacist ideology from another supremacist ideology that is in play right now, and that is Israel, right? And what Israel is doing in Gaza, right? I think a lot of what the confidence that Modi got for doing what he did was straight from the Israeli playbook. This was, Muslims are in a very difficult situation right now. They're besieged from all sides. Let's target them here as well and teach them a valuable lesson that they surely need, and they will never then raise this thing. Now, Allah ka shukr hai, we're extremely grateful to God that in this particular episode, Modi was given a run for his money. and he wasn't really able to impact, really do anything. In fact, in like strategically, dekha jaye, so he has really harmed himself, and the state positions that India has had. I think he's had to withdraw from a lot of the positions that he recently took, and it's because of those. It's when you have irrational ideology take over your foreign policy, your military policy, your internal dynamics, your national security policy. That is when really you start having these decisions being made where let's attack somebody instead of cooperate with them and find a solution, mutually beneficial solution. Just one last point here, just to give evidence for why I feel Modi and his government are not interested in really finding a solution to terrorism is if you look at how they've been when it's come to Pakistan, say after the Mumbai attacks, right? India, kept on saying Pakistan isn't doing anything for bringing, these non-state actors to justice, and there's an obligation of Pakistan. When we asked for evidence so that we could start a trial here, the Indians gave us photocopies. They gave us, and as a lawyer, you know that photocopies are not even admissible in court, right? Those photocopies that they gave us as evidence would not have been admissible in an Indian court, let alone a Pakistani court across the jurisdiction, right? So one, they weren't, and then they kept on delaying it. The reason was the delays were allowed them to use Pakistan again and again as a whipping boy because the world doesn't understand the legal minutia of, oh, these are photocopies, not attested copies or verified copies. Secondly, when we sent a commission to gather evidence again and again, they did not permit the commission to undertake an effective investigation. And so obviously that is going to have an impact on the cases here in Pakistan. And Pakistan government, honestly, I mean, I've been part of some of these proceedings, and they tried their level best to ensure that we could do something because there was immense pressure on Pakistan, not just from India but from the international communities, especially the United States. So it's really looking at that mindset of having Pakistan as a Muslim whipping boy that India can, whip every now and then, just as Israel has made Gaza and Palestine the area where they can mow the lawn. They say every few years they'll do an operation, mow the lawn, mow the grass, kill a few Palestinians, and this will just be the new normal. So that is, I think, the approach that Modi's been taking.
Thank you for that, Aviz. I think Twitter is now once again blocked, but when it was unblocked during that very brief period, obviously, everybody or a vast majority of people, started tweeting, and so did I. And eventually, when the ceasefire was declared, I thanked the government of Pakistan and the armed forces, and I said that, you've done a great job, but now please do something for your brethren in Gaza because it's just so painful to see. I mean, I don't really want to digress from today's topic to Gaza because that in itself is something that's just so horrific that I think words have now failed. I think it's time for some sort of action, which unfortunately the Islamic countries have failed to take. But anyway, on that note, I would actually like to thank the government of Pakistan and the armed forces of Pakistan because it's because of them that we're safe and India got an answer, and the whole world was actually able to see. Uh, and I think that Pakistan, as you rightly said, has been quite undermined, underestimated, especially by India, even by the West. And I think that this was actually something that has opened the eyes of the whole world that there is a country called Pakistan and it's not a weak Islamic nation by any means. So you're absolutely right. I think Modi got the right response. Okay, so just moving on, Awais, moving on from this fascist ideology point now. Um, let's focus a little bit on some of the legal aspects over here. Let's look at Operation Sindoor. It was carried out in the dead of night. You've already said, that the Geneva Conventions were obviously it was violated. The question arises about liability now. And if you could just shed some light on the Rome Statute and whether India, Pakistan are parties or not, whether India can be accountable in the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court or not, because this is the question that needs to be discussed now. Thank you.
Absolutely. If we were to look at Operation Sindoor, the initial salvo that India fired across the border, it was again, as you mentioned, in the dead of night, and it targeted civilians specifically. There's no alternative special category of people you suspect to be terrorists. Everyone's a civilian if you're not military, right? Um, and especially you simply can't have without a trial or without any sort of basis, especially not without cooperating with the host state, have this determination that we will target these people, right? I think what Modi this particular act that he did was he thought that he can be what the US has been throughout this global war on terror and its drone strikes on Pakistani territory and things like that. That can work for, say, a superpower, a country that at times has been drunk on its own power, has been, that bloodlust that developed after 9/11. We saw that being implemented, in our border areas, and we saw that. Modi thought that he could do that, and he initially tried it during the Balakot strikes, and of course that really didn't amount to anything other than India losing a plane and a pilot, right? Um, right now, in this particular essence, he had to escalate from that. He had to show bodies, he had to show, well, and what he eventually got was women and children who were struck, people who were not in, who there's simply no evidence whatsoever that they were struck. And secondly, again, something going back to the ideology, he struck mosques, right? And that is a particularly heinous act to do because you're looking at a country, this ideology be Pakistan ki, is an Islamic ideology. We have but the people are deeply hurt by such a thing. And I think so his motive wasn't just to strike at particular suspected terrorists. His motive was to strike at the national psyche to elicit a response so that he could do something. The problem was that he did not expect Pakistan's defense to be as robust as it was. Bringing down five planes within an hour, having one of the largest, aerial battles in modern history, taking down Rafale jets, and I want to get to eventually, what that actually means, taking down a Rafale jet. But taking down five jets and one particular jet from 190 kilometers distance, right, far beyond visual range. This is something which was an incredible feat and really drastically reduced then Modi's options afterwards. And we saw, why missiles were used as opposed to other weapons after this, because the air fleet was basically grounded after this because they realized that our air force is useless at this point. Um, Now looking at the violations of law. So we have two things that took place. First of all, violating the peace, right? When you launch that first attack, that is basically aggression. And there is the crime of aggression that took place because it is a violation of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter. Article 2.4 of the UN Charter says that you simply cannot take actions that interfere or undermine a state's political independence or its territorial integrity, right? And Pakistan's territorial integrity. So this violates the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty is that on my territory, I am king, I am boss. Pakistanis take decisions on Pakistani soil, right? India can't interfere by doing that. And so the lawful mechanism, I mean, under the concept of international law that we have, India should have asked Pakistan that, can we conduct a joint investigation or some form of thing? Then Pakistan would have taken action within its territory. Instead, India decided to throw missiles and destroy things. Now, in response to this, is Pakistan authorized to take self-defense? Yes. Right. So you have Article 51, which says that if you are subject to an armed attack, you can resort to self-defense. Now, self-defense has to be necessary, proportionate. It has to be immediate in time, and ultimately it has to then be reported to the Security Council. Ideally before the event happens, but also immediately afterwards. Now, what we saw was that if Pakistan had struck back as it did, the aerial platforms, the Rafale jets, the other air jets, that was completely justified. In fact, that is textbook self-defense, right? So if Pakistan had in fact gone further and say attacked the air bases from which these jets were launched, that would also be justified if it had done so at that particular moment. But Pakistan chose restraint at that point, right? So what we see is that there was a range of violations of the use of force. Now, this is separate from what happens in war. This is whether you're allowed to enter war. India was not allowed to enter war. what it did was therefore a violation of Article 2.4, and so a violation of the law of use of force. Um, Now, do we have a place to go to do this? Not really, sadly. The crime of aggression, unless the ICC is a place that you can go for this, but we didn't really have, and I'll get to why the ICJ and the ICC are really off the table right now. Um, the second thing was that once India had attacked, the targets it chose were civilian targets, right? That the deliberate targeting of civilians is now a violation of the laws of war, IHL, right? So it's against the Geneva Convention, as we just discussed earlier, and therefore that became something low. In response, when Pakistan targeted jets, fighter jets, completely lawful because you have to target military targets. Anything that neutralizes or undermines the military potential of the enemy is completely justified, right? So that initial salvo there. After that, what we saw was India having drones thrown into Pakistan, and Pakistan at this point was showing a lot of restraint, if you recall, right? We didn't take action, we didn't strike their bases, and in fact, there was a lot of diplomacy taking place behind the scenes that Pakistan should just accept the 5 jets it's taken down. There's evidence of it. The world's accepted it. That's a huge win. India has been dented. Pakistan should stop. But what happened was that in India, just to save face, it seems, Modi went ahead and said, even though the direct words after, if you recall, were we want to de-escalate at this point after they had done their attack. But in action, I mean, in words, it's easy. Talk is cheap, but when it came to action, they weren't really doing that. And so they sent in drones and drones all the way up to Rawalpindi and deep within Pakistan. We saw drones being shot down in Lahore, all the way up to Karachi as well. We saw a lot of this happening, and so this was across the country, and that really had a not only a military impact where they were probing our defenses, trying to find out where our radar systems were for our HQ-9 anti-air defenses, but also what it was doing was really having a psychological impact on the people. And as you said, people were terrified, people were worried about what's going to happen. Um, so it's in this thing have and then those drones were being shot down over civilian territories because wherever they could get shot down. Now, whether it was through electronic war, soft kills, just look at them, that they were jamming them and they were bringing them down that way, or whether they were hard kills through bullets and through missiles, however they were bringing them down. But eventually, some of them fell on civilian areas and they could have killed and hurt people. I think there were some injuries that took place because of these, especially given the how many were involved. So that again would be a violation of the laws of war because putting civilians in danger in this sense is something. Knowing that your drones would be operating like this, that would be a violation. Then what we have after that is India launching those missiles onto our bases, Pakistani bases. Now that again, those are military targets primarily. But knowing that a lot of their missiles went errant because of the electronic warning systems that we had, the electronic warfare systems that we had, we were able to jam some of them, and their trajectories were lost. But they could have fallen on civilian areas, and many of them fell, here and there. Things that we couldn't control, but Indians certainly could control by not firing them, right? So that again is something that is concerning from a IHL perspective, from a Geneva Conventions perspective. Um, then really the question arises, does Pakistan have the right of responding, self-defense again, right? So it was a new salvo, a new thing. And I think that was 100%, again, textbook proportionate. And we didn't target civilians. We didn't target some random places. We targeted the places where these missiles were fired from, where the jets were fired from, so air bases and things like that. And there's an abundance of evidence now all over social media, but also in the international media, which shows that Pakistan's targets were not civilian targets; they were military targets in that regard. So uh, I think, and I don't want people to think that this is a one-sided affair, but we really have to look at it as it is. On the line of control, there was immense shelling, and there were civilians that were also targeted. Any deliberate targeting, whether it's from Pakistan or from India, of civilians, that is completely unjustified, and that is a violation of the laws of war. But generally, what we saw was a lot of Indian posts, a lot of Indian, brigade headquarters and things like that being struck, and Indian soldiers, and that is completely justified under the laws of war. So yeah, that's the position there. Yeah, please.
Thanks, Aviz. Yeah, thank you for explaining all of that in so much of detail and, in the context of the Geneva Convention and the UN Charter. Donald Trump had said this was before Pakistan retaliated, and this was when the first attack took place on the mosques and civilians. He said this was a tit for tat situation, right? And it's almost like accepting the fact that right Pahalgam was carried out by Pakistan, so India has responded tit for tat. I mean, this coming from the U.S. president, it's all, without an investigation, without knowing the actual facts. It's and actually this brings me to the next question, which is to do with media and Islamophobia and how
Yeah.
Western media or media in general, manipulates narratives very easily, labels Muslims and especially Pakistanis as terrorists without, without any kind of due diligence, etc. And then obviously this phrase that Donald Trump, came up with, tit for tat situation. Um, so what is your take on that in the sense that um, when we talk about Western media and we talk about you must have seen during that 1 week this news reporter from Sky News, Yalda Hakim, she was interviewing Mr. Tarar and Mr. Khwaja Asif and
Well,
several other politicians as well. And she came under a lot of attack on Twitter by Pakistanis um, because of the way that she was presenting the news. And then later on, there were pictures of her circulating with this Indian politician who happens to be Modi's, right hand person, who again very easily said, by the way, that any attack that took place on Pakistani soil targeted terrorists, so it was justified. And then I also want to quote over here the Indian politician and intellectual Shashi Tharoor, who I had a lot of respect for prior to this episode. He said quite openly that any people who were killed were related to terrorists, and so their murder essentially was justified. And all of this coming from the media and circulated around the world, and again that picture of terrorism presented, uh, it I find it repugnant personally. So obviously you're the expert when it comes to terrorism and the media's portrayal of it. So what is your take on that, and what is your take on Donald Trump's statement in particular on the tit for tat situation? Because obviously, we've been talking about India violating international humanitarian law. Now he is the president of the United States. Why did he not? Obviously, we know that with the Gaza episode that they probably wouldn't talk about it. But then it's just saying a lot about Western democracies, is it not? So yeah, I'll leave you to shed some light on.
absolutely. So you've raised a really important question. I think it's come to a point where we really need to face facts, whether they are harsh and the truth can be bitter at times, right? But if the last year and a half, especially since October 7th, and the the onslaught on Gaza, if one thing has become clear is that Islamophobia is in the how should I say this? It's in the roots of Western media, right? They can't seem to be able to get out of it. And there's a very good reason for this, right? Post World War II, they created this beautiful world where human rights were at the forefront, human dignity was there. But that worked until for as long as that human dignity applied to Europeans, Americans, and the Western world, really. Right? When that dignity had to be extended, when those rights had to be extended to the global South, the subaltern, the brown man, if you will, that's when things started becoming problematic for them, and they started withdrawing. Whether you saw it was refugee law, and them raising their alarms because Syrian refugees were entering Europe. Um, if you saw it from the perspective of uh, the right to life and drone attacks occurring, we need to start striking Muslims, this and that. And of course, the entire 2 decades of the war on terror, right? That was just classical. Well, how could we have to dehumanize the enemy, because dehumanization makes, once you otherize the enemy and you dehumanize it, it becomes very easy to kill them then, right? That level of what is it, the cognitive burden of murder reduces. right? Whether it's in war, whether you're doing it through a drone sitting in Utah somewhere, and the drone strike is hitting somebody in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, it becomes a lot easier if they're animals, if they're not humans, if you degrade them so much. And that's really what the recipe was. Now, underlying this, you also saw in recent years, especially the last decade, two entities around the world that were really the open bearers of the flag of Islamophobia. One was Israel, right? A lot of the intellectual rigor that has gone into dehumanizing Muslims across the world has come from Israeli scholars, the Israeli government, across the board, where they very openly claim that the same rights that are accorded to white-skinned Westerners do not have to be accorded to the brown man and brown woman. Right. That's number one. And secondly, what we've seen as a tool of amplification for much of this Islamophobia is Hindutva India, right? Where their bots and their bot farms and their the billion people or so that are on the internet, like you simply cannot make a remark which has anything to do with India without being, having the women in your life threatened, having yourself receiving death threats, your children being threatened like that, because you will have Indians, in the comments in literally everything. I look at Dawn News, Pakistani newspaper, right? And the majority of comments in some of the article under some of the articles are all Indians. I mean, they probably read more of our articles than we do, it seems, right? It is simply this very unfortunate trend that the world has gone towards. And backtracking from that or coming to a place where we weren't so radicalized against Muslims is very difficult. But at the same time, I think people have gotten tired of this war on terror narrative and blah blah blah. The things that have literally got kaan pakke hain sun ke for the last 2 decades, right? I think everyone is tired of it. It's not just Muslims, but the whole world is now sick and tired of it. We need something else to move on to, right? And that I think is the only ray of hope that I see going on. Much of the struggle that we see right now, with regards to say protests on campuses in the U.S., that is really striking at the core of this thing. And I feel that the way the war on terror was fought, military anyone else does, and realizing that human element to it, I think is really having an impact on especially the younger generations. Gen Z is playing a huge role in realizing that the ideals that our parents held, or our grandparents held, those are not true anymore, and they don't bear out on the facts. So I think that's really where much of that particular thing comes from.
मैं थोड़ा सा उर्दू में भी बोलूंगी because I'm sure that not all English speaking people will be seeing this webinar. लेकिन टेररिज्म पे हमारे अपने पाकिस्तानी इतनी बहस करते हैं कि हम हमारे यहाँ बहुत टेररिस्ट हैं और हम ये पहले हम अपने आप को देखेंगे भाई क्या हम अपने आप को देखेंगे and I'm going to say this very openly that I am actually sick and tired of people calling Muslims terrorists or even people calling Pakistani terrorists because we have been uh, underestimated a lot. हमें समझा गया है that we are nothing. ये हमारे अपने लोग भी बहुत ज्यादा करते हैं कंडेम कि भाई हमारे मुल्ला ऐसे हैं, हमारी मस्जिदें ऐसी हैं, हमारे मदरसे ऐसे हैं. ठीक है, there are
Mhm.
crimes in every sphere of the world. And even within Pakistan, we have many problems. We have political problems, we've got legal problems, we've got social problems, we have economic problems,
Equally.
we've got hundreds of problems. We have problems with regards to law and order. We know that. Being lawyers, we know कि यहाँ कितने मसले हैं, यहाँ क्राइम का मसला है, जेंडर बेस्ड वायलेंस है, सब कुछ है. लेकिन यहाँ
Equally.
पे भी विद इन आवर ओन कंट्री जो ये एक आइडियोलॉजी बन गई है कि भाई मुल्ला ऐसे हैं. एंड माय थिंकिंग इज कि भाई जब इफ यू आर अ मुस्लिम आपकी मौत होगी तो वही मुल्ला ही आपके नमाज जनाजा पे it's not going to be a rabbi or a priest, it's going
Absolutely.
to be a mullah, right? So again, this is something that I wanted to talk about कि भाई हमारे अपने ही लोग जब इस तरीके की बातें करते हैं, and some people actually did even during this particular crisis. And this was a time where I know that post the ceasefire, we have seen a wave of nationalism in Pakistan. सब एक इकट्ठे हो गए इवन ड्यूरिंग दिस क्राइसिस जो हमारे यहाँ डिस्टिंक्शन थे बिटवीन पंजाबी सिंधी महाजिर पश्तून वो सब खत्म हो गए थे आई मीन वी वर ऑल पाकिस्तानी फॉर ऑल इंटेंट्स वी आर
Absolutely.
you know that's what we are सारे sectarian differences Shia Sunni के खत्म हो गए थे because ultimately we are Muslims and we are Pakistanis we stand together and we're human beings.
Or Sana, if I could just add,
Yeah, sure.
I know we were going through a war, but I cannot tell you how good it felt to be united after so long. All of the country was coming together, right? I understand how dangerous the situation was, but I couldn't help feel that at the same time. So that's one thing. You also mentioned कि हम खुद जो हैं, we sometimes label ourselves and we adopt जब हमें एक uh, we're so at times the mind is still so colonized that we get our ideas and our signals from the West that we sometimes consider ourselves maybe we are terrorists or maybe we are intellectually inferior or something like that, right? And that is something that we need to fight, especially this new generation, right? We cannot remain intellectually colonized, right? We have to break free of this, and it has to be a conscious decision. The other thing that I wanted to mention was do not let yourself do what has been done unto you. We have at times we have scapegoated the Afghans just as the Americans have scapegoated Muslims, right? So Afghan citizens in Pakistan, we have demonized them, we have dehumanized them, and that has allowed us to take liberties with their rights that we would never want taken with Pakistani rights, right? Or with Pakistan. And that I think is something that we need to realize that if you stare into the abyss too long, it might stare back. And that's something that is deeply concerning that we should never, ever, ever go down a path where we start dehumanizing any entity, whether it is Afghans, whether it is our own people, or whether it's even the Indians, right? Because that is just a recipe for disaster, intolerance, and bigotry.
I completely agree with you, Wes. In fact, I was saying to somebody, and I said, we often criticize our own country, but the truth of the matter is that आप देखें पाकिस्तान में आप किसी के भी घर जाएंगे anybody is going to be extremely hospitable to you ठीक है especially when we have foreigners चाहे कोई अफ्रीका से आए चाहे कोई चाइना से आए कोई
Absolutely.
वेस्टर्न कंट्री से आ जाए तो और ज्यादा खिदमत हो जाती है बट एंड इवन इफ people come from India and we all have our backgrounds my father was from Burhanpur my mother's family were from
Mhm.
India as well I uh, so obviously India is and we were all Indians weren't we once upon a time at the end of the day तो हमारे यहाँ कोई वैसे अगर देखा जाए and this is on the basis of my interaction with many Pakistani people over the decades. हमारे यहाँ इतनी resentment या hatred वैसे है नहीं towards anybody. I mean, we're always ready to open our doors to people, especially people from foreign countries. And
Yeah.
and in Pakistan, people are always delighted to talk about India, to talk about their backgrounds. जी हम मीरठ के थे, हम फलानी जगह के थे. So we don't actually have that hatred. Oh, okay, we've got extremists everywhere in the world. You've got white extremists, you've got Hindu extremists, so you do have Muslim extremists as well. So ये हर जगह होते हैं, but in general, I don't think that we have this culture of hatred. Yes, we do. What we have is a problem in our country to do with illiteracy and to do with this false narrative that is, circulated. So yes, we have seen attacks on temples and other things over the years. But फिर ये पूरी दुनिया में होता है ना वेस्टर्न कंट्रीज में कुरान जला देते हैं अभी जो ये अटैक हुआ इसमें मस्जिदें खत्म कर दी कुरान हमारे फटे हुए पड़े थे जमीन पे तो this is something that isn't just limited to the Muslim world or to Pakistan. This happens everywhere in the world. This concept of hatred is
Absolutely. So just one more point on
yeah,
this
sure.
specifically. खुदा न खास्ता जब यहाँ पे किसी हिंदू टेम्पल पे अटैक होता है या पर्टिकुलर माइनॉरिटीज पे अटैक्स होते हैं whether it claims lives or not, this is something that even goes up to the prime ministerial level and it is condemned at the highest levels of state, right? Action is taken, people are brought to justice. Whereas in our neighboring country, unfortunately, it is almost a state policy to condone whether it is beef vigilantes, whether it is people who are attacking Muslims. You see so many videos coming out where Muslims are routinely, harassed, beaten on the road, slapped around, forced to shout Jai Shri Ram and statements like this. And Right now, we saw, the Saudi flag being put on the floor and people being asked to walk over it, Muslims, to test their loyalty. How does your loyalty to India matter to a third country, and that to a third country that carries the Muslim kalma on its flag, right? So this is, it just is something, and then you don't ever hear anything from Modi condemning this, right? In fact, it is condoned whether you have Yogi Adityanath in UP, the chief minister there, openly supporting crimes against Muslims, dead Muslim women. He said, dig them up from the graves and violate them. And if they get one of yours, get 10 of them. I think statements like this. It is just when it comes from the state, right? And Allah ka shukr, you will never hear anything, not even from the religious parties in parliament, anything that encourages this type of violence against minorities. Allah ka shukr. And I'm extremely humble about this. And certainly, it's very easy that things can get out of control. But at this particular point, I thank God that this is not the case, that, we all condemn any form of violence against any minority in Pakistan, right? Where that sadly isn't the case across the border.
You're absolutely right. And मेरा सवाल ये है, and I'm going to say this very openly, though I have a lot of respect for Britain and America, well, a lot of respect for Britain in any case, because I lived there and all of my books are based in Victorian England, so I have this fascination. But we have to face the reality, and the reality is that the invasions of Afghanistan, of Iraq, and then India's invasion of Pakistan recently, when we are looking at this concept of terrorism, it makes me wonder, who is the actual terrorist and what is terrorism if we actually look at it. I know that we have this image of these Muslim men wearing this scarf covering their faces and shouting Allahu Akbar. ये इन्होंने एक बना लिया है, a sort of drama, right? That this is what terrorism is. And if that is what terrorism is in your eyes, I mean, in the eyes of the West, or somebody who's a non-Muslim, then it's not terrorism. This is your version of what terrorism is. But if we actually look at uh, terrorism in its actuality, it's harming innocent people. So the West did that. India did that recently. So वो एक सवाल उठता है कि what does terrorism mean? And I think that this is the point where you're right, Oves, people are now talking about it, thinking about it. People have changed their ideas, but many haven't. अब ये जो सारे episodes हो रहे हैं, इससे और ज्यादा this concept of terrorism is being embedded in people's heads and equating that
Yeah.
with Islamophobia, etc. Before we just move on, I just wanted to go back to that whole international humanitarian law thing and accountability. And I wanted to ask you that could you just explain very briefly that when we talk about the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, can India be taken there? Can it not be taken there? And why? Thank
Thank you. No, this is a great question because well, sometimes we hear, and I think even under one of our posts, somebody said that India should be taken to the International Court of Justice, right? And it's a lovely concept. It's great in the imagination that there is a court where you can take your international matters to. Unfortunately, that, as you know, is not really the case, right? You can't approach the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is not like a Pakistani district court or Supreme Court where they can just call people up, or you are bound to show up. It deals with states, and states are sovereign, right? And states therefore have to give their jurisdiction, accept the court's jurisdiction, right, and accept those grounds to be able to go there. So there are really four ways of going to the ICJ for a case. The first is that there is a special agreement called a compromise, right? A special agreement between two states, and they say, okay, look, we have this dispute, let's go resolve it. And the best place to resolve it is the International Court of Justice. We'll use it, just say arbitration nahi hoti. So it's a form of finding a neutral arbitrator or judge and going to it. So you go to the ICJ as that neutral entity. Now that's number one, right? Pakistan and India will never come to such an agreement to resolve any of the issues that they have. The second is a compromissory clause in a treaty, which says essentially that if there is a problem in this treaty, we can have it resolved by recourse to the International Court of Justice. If you recall, India took Pakistan to the ICJ for the Kulbhushan Yadav case. Now, the Kulbhushan Yadav case, what they relied on was a compromissory clause in the optional protocol to the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. So there's the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, both parties are party to it. Then there's an optional protocol which relates to a resolution of disputes. So dispute resolution की एक अलग से protocol है, that too both parties have signed, and that is that if any aspect in relation to the interpretation or application of the Vienna Convention arises, you can take that matter to the ICJ, and that is how India took us, and we had to go. Right? This was not a voluntary thing. We did not decide to go there. India took us there, and we were forced because we had signed the convention. We had ratified it. The third way is an optional voluntary declaration which accepts the court's jurisdiction. Now, both India and Pakistan do have such declarations. The only problem is that India's declaration is so watertight that Pakistan can't bring a case. Basically, India has said that yes, we accept the court's jurisdiction, except if it's to do with our territorial integrity, except if it's to do with national security, and if it's brought by a country that is a member of the Commonwealth. Now, any case we bring is going to affect India's territorial integrity because we're talking about Kashmir. It's going to affect India's national security if we bring this Pahalgam or this current incident to it. And thirdly, we are a member of the Commonwealth, right? So we simply cannot ever bring any case against India under that. And the fourth is an advisory jurisdiction, is the advisory jurisdiction of the court. Now, this is non-binding. What happens is that UN bodies or specialized UN agencies can make a reference to the ICJ. Could you clarify a point of law for us? And this is under Article 65 of the International Court of Justice. And they basically, and this has been done in a number of things. The nuclear weapons, whether nuclear weapons were lawful under international law. A decision was an opinion was given on that. The Israeli wall opinion; these are all referred to by specialized UN agencies done there. Now, this is something. Seems the only viable way of really going to the UN. But you need to get you need to have enough votes in, say, a UN body, whether it's the UN General Assembly, or whether it is the Security Council, whether it is the WHO or any of the specialized agencies. Does Pakistan have enough diplomatic support to get a reference made there? And it's not impossible. It's just I think at times our foreign office has a rather timid approach, a highly conservative approach when it comes to approaching such entities, and that's why you can't really go to the ICJ. So these were the four grounds, and this is, I hope it clarifies a lot of the the issues surrounding that. Now, with regards to the International Criminal Court, this is this really depends on the states. Now, when a country signs up to the Rome Statute, which is a statute of the ICC, International Criminal Court, any war crimes that are conducted, or any of the offenses, whether it's genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, crimes against humanity, war crimes, etc., any of them, if they're conducted on its territory by an outside party, they can be taken. So, if, for example, Pakistan had ratified the ICC and India struck within Pakistani territory, then Indian officials or Indian officers or Indian army personnel could be taken to the the ICC. The second is if Pakistan had ratified it and then Pakistani troops did some war crimes or crimes against humanity against some other entity or even against its own citizens, it could be taken to the ICC. And that's how it works. But in this case, neither Pakistan nor India have ratified the ICC. The only entity in our region that has is Afghanistan, really. So, like if there were, war crimes that were being conducted there, that could be something that could be raised at the ICC, certainly. But so that's why, an international forum is really not something that we should expect any form of justice from at this stage. Does that mean that international law is useless? On the outside, many people could simply say ostensibly international law has not been able to do anything, has not been able to stop Gaza. It hasn't been able to stop the atrocities between Pakistan and India. At the same time, this is what I've discussed with you before as well, G, is that international law gives us the language of critique, right? It gives us the ability to call what is wrong, wrong. Like the fact that earlier on I explained that targeting of civilians is a war crime. That itself is a creation of international law, right? The standard is, the Geneva Conventions, a part of international law, says that the deliberate targeting of civilians is unlawful. And the whole world has agreed to this definition. And therefore, when a state does it like India has, the minimum, at least we have this common understanding that what they did was wrong. And at least we can use that in our messaging, in our diplomacy, and in our criticism of Israel. like that. And so that is something that I think international law, despite its numerous failings, despite its weaknesses, its inability to enforce decisions and outcomes on perpetrators of violence and of harm, it still gives us this language of critique, which I think is still very, very important.
No, I mean, both of those institutions are very important. I mean, had they not existed, I think that there would have been zero accountability. I think at least there is some level of accountability. I mean, in the ICJ, we keep hearing, all the parties who have condemned, the Israeli attacks on Gaza. So at least we, as you rightly said, that there is this critique of what is right and what is wrong, and then the ICC issuing the arrest warrants against Netanyahu
Yeah.
and others as well. So yes, it's great that they exist, and but it's unfortunate that they have zero implementation. So that is a problem. Probably not zero implementation, but yes. And Aves, thank you so much for explaining that, because most people, and I myself was also quite unclear about this particular framework with regards to the ICJ and ICC and whether Pakistan can approach them or not. Now, moving forward, and this is probably the last thing that I want to discuss with you, because I know I've taken so much of your time. It has been an absolutely wonderful discussion with you. You are,
Thank you.
mashallah, extremely knowledgeable, and you have very clearly explained uh, uh, things, laws, and concepts which were unclear to many. I'm sure that you've answered many queries already. So we've reached this ceasefire. I find it, and I know that many people in the world find it very mysterious what went on behind closed doors. Post the ceasefire, we have post Donald Trump's tweet regarding the ceasefire, we have been hearing of tensions, diplomatic tensions, and physical tensions along the line of control. Do you think that Modi is going to do something else and try and accuse Pakistan? And whatever we witnessed in the last week or so, do you think, Khudana Khasa, it's likely to repeat again?
Sunny, you're basically asking me to look into a crystal ball and try to predict the future. I honestly don't know, right? But looking at what's happened over the last few days, trying to discern some trajectory of where relations are going, I think the ceasefire is going to hold, and the ceasefire is going to hold for a number of reasons, at least in my opinion. One, the level of confidence that Trump displayed and repeatedly displayed, like literally every single day when he was on his Middle East tour, he's been discussing this in different venues and really taking credit for it. So there's a lot of stakes for the US president in this. Um, uh, and if the US president is really the mediator behind this, and it seems, ostensibly that it is, uh, you know, it would be a lot of, it would be very, shameful for the Indians to betray or backstab the US government, especially when they're in the middle of a trade deal, and we know that Trump can be a vindictive individual who holds a grudge. So in that sense, I think it will hold for that. The Looking at why this ceasefire came about. Now, again, that is a lot of there's fog of war, there's mystery, there's a lot of misinformation coming from both sides. But who has been able to achieve their ends more, or um, really come out of this less scathed, if you will? I don't know if we can conceptualize it, but I think there's been a huge loss of reputation for India, right? They feel and they look, and the words that are coming, the language that is being used, they look like they've been defeated. Now, whether or not Pakistan had struck them at a level where it forced them to really reevaluate their options, where they had to resort to hypersonic cruise missiles, which really escalated things, as opposed to the weapons that Pakistan used. Pakistan used Fatah 1, Fatah 2 rockets, right, which are nowhere near the our cruise missiles are the Babur cruise missiles. So the equivalent of BrahMos, we didn't even use those, right? India struck our bases with those BrahMos missiles. So there is something that is missing. There was some uh, degradation in the Indian capability that was showing, right? And especially the loss that they had with regards to the Rafales. Now, just one word on the Rafales. The Rafale was the Rafale plane, right? This fighter jet is one of the most advanced in the world, right? It is, and we shouldn't just understand it as something that is maneuverable, can go very high, can go very fast, can carry a lot of weapons. That's not it. What you really need to understand is that the Rafale has, this exceptionally advanced electronic warfare suite and different pods in it called Spectra, right? And it is developed by these French companies, and it is exceptionally difficult to jam. Its radars are able to detect entities far away, and no matter what type of jamming and GPF spoofing and all of these technical terms that or tools that people use, it is extremely difficult to get that. Now, the other thing is that when you are trying to target a Rafale, it has this ability of trying to confuse your radar system. So you think that the Rafale is in one location where actually it'll be in a different location, and it's got a number of tools to do this to protect it from getting shot down by a missile in and therefore people whenever that's why Modi was so confident. In fact, after Balakot, he said, our person would never, Abhinandan would never have been shot down had we had the Rafales, right? And so now they had the Rafales and they were all set. We're going to teach Pakistan a lesson. And what happens within the first hour of hostilities was that they lost two Rafales, which are now being acknowledged widely, most likely a third Rafale as well. And they lost a number of other jets like that. Losing three Rafales, things that are supposed to be on paper, theoretically untouchable, right? You can't even detect them. They're almost, ghosts in the air like that. To take them out with Chinese weaponry, just completely changed the ballgame. And that was something that they couldn't really comprehend, and it changed the military strategy. And that's why you did not have aerial strikes on Pakistan afterwards, even from a distance, because they knew that we could, because we struck them, within their territory. So they started using drones, mass use of drones, and then they started using their missiles, which was a very escalatory thing. But this was also a sign of their desperation, really, at that point. So I think going into the ceasefire was more in India's favor, in the sense that it prevented them from taking more losses, and from it allowed them to save face and that. What happened ultimately out of this entire thing was Pakistan, I think, emerged in a much better position. I think even before this, we said that there is the nuclear threshold, and below it is the conventional warfighting capability. And India has better conventional warfighting capability. When it comes to the air forces, we've now realized that there is parity. India might have the numbers, but the quality is on Pakistan's side, right? And the way that our radars and our jets and our satellites and everything work together seamlessly, that is really something that has given, I think, a reason to pause and really look at the situation again. So that is something there. After this, I don't know if you noticed, but Modi announced that a 10-day yatra will be launched all throughout India to tell them of all the benefits and all the successes they've had in Operation Sindoor. If you've won, right, you don't have to do a yatra for it. The world knows you've won, right? So it's really interesting how the two sides are looking at this, and of course they will try to save face however they can. But is the ceasefire going to hold? I think it is going to hold. In the initial hours of it, we saw that there were still LOC violations and things like that. But I was convinced that this happens whenever a ceasefire takes hold after some hostilities. It takes a while to settle, really congeal, and then you have that. That seems to be settling, and it's been extended till May 18th. I think the DGMOs are going there. There's no real sign of India um, building up an arsenal to strike us again. They're calling it a victory. We're calling it a victory. It seems to be over right now. But the problem is, the only thing that I think that can disturb this peace is pressure domestically in India. Because of how humiliating this has been, the Indian public may actually, try to hold Modi accountable for this. He might even see election losses in the Bihar elections. He might see, pretty significant erosion of his support base, and that might lead to trying to settle the score. But so far, I think we should be in a very satisfied position from Pakistan's perspective.
That's excellently put. Abhay is absolutely right. And coming back to the crystal ball comment that you made at the very start, I actually was doing that. I mean, not looking for an actual crystal ball, but I have some form of intuition. So Throughout that 1 week, I was speaking to a friend, and she said, "नहीं नहीं अब कुछ भी नहीं होगा, अब कुछ भी नहीं होगा." And every time she said that, मेरे दिल में खटका, and I said to her, "No, actually, I feel like something's about to happen." And I had this very
Hmm.
strong feeling, and every time I had this strong feeling, कोई धमाका हो गया था. So it's best if I don't have any
Oh
more
my God.
strong feelings now. But yes,
That's true.
I hope and pray that it stays this way. And you're right for all the logical reasons that you mentioned. It seems that it should stay this way. But the pressure building within India, they have faced a lot of criticism from the masses. The foreign secretary, I think Vikram Mistry, that's what his name is. He had to block his Twitter account or something because of the barrage of
Hmm.
criticism and vitriol that he was receiving after the ceasefire. And Abhi, the Indians are looking at the ceasefire in a very suspicious manner. So I don't know where is this going, but yes, we have faith in the Almighty, and we hope and pray things remain as they are. Always
Inshallah.
on that note, inshallah. On that note, I'd like to thank you from the depths of my heart for taking out so much of time, for being on this webinar and for clarifying these concepts. Because to be very honest, I think for people in general and even for the legal fraternity, they are complex matters. So thank you so much for shedding so much of light on everything.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
And I'd like to say to the audience that if you have any questions for Oves, you can get in touch with him on LinkedIn. If you have any questions for us, you can just add those in the comments box as well, or if you just want to make any comments as well. For more information on the DLA webinars, please check the website www.dla.com.pk. Thank you so much for listening to us, and Oves, thank you so much once again. And I hope to have you again as a guest speaker on one of our webinars in the future, inshallah.
I'd love to. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Aviv. Goodbye.
Goodbye.